When Western nations imposed sweeping sanctions on Russian oil after the invasion of Ukraine, Moscow was supposed to face economic collapse. Oil revenues should have dried up, and the war machine should have ground to a halt. But here's the thing. Russia found a workaround that's been hiding in plain sight. While politicians celebrated their sanction packages, hundreds of aging oil tankers quietly continued moving Russian crude across the world's oceans, generating billions of dollars each month. These vessels operate under fake flags, ghost companies, and falsified insurance documents. Now, Ukraine has decided to fight back in the most unexpected way possible. Using domestically built naval drones, Ukrainian forces have started hunting these tankers in international waters, striking vessels worth tens of millions of dollars with precision attacks that are reshaping maritime warfare and putting serious pressure on Russia's most vital revenue stream. Russia's shadow fleet consists of over 1,100 oil tankers that Moscow has assembled to bypass Western sanctions. These aren't sleek modern vessels. Most of them are ancient rust buckets that should have been scrapped years ago, bought up at bargain prices and pressed into service. Russia invested roughly $15 billion building this armada, purchasing tankers that were literally destined for the scrapyard. The system works through layers of deception that would make any spy novel jealous. Tankers sail under flags of convenience from countries like Panama, Liberia, and Gabon. They're registered to shell companies in Dubai and other jurisdictions that ask very few questions. Insurance documents are either fabricated or provided by obscure firms that operate far outside Western regulatory reach. The scale of this operation is staggering. In October 2024 alone, Russia earned $13.1 billion from oil and petroleum product sales. The Shadow Fleet now accounts for roughly 70% of all Russian seaborne oil exports. Western nations tried to implement a $60 per barrel price cap to limit Moscow's profits, but Russia simply ignored it. These tankers sell oil at around $65 per barrel because they operate completely outside Western jurisdiction. No Western banks handle the transactions, no Western insurance companies cover the cargo, and no Western port authorities inspect the vessels. The environmental risks are equally troubling. 2/3 of Shadow Fleet tankers have unknown insurance providers, which means if something goes wrong, there's no real accountability. Many of these vessels are over 20 years old and barely meet basic safety standards. In January 2024, a Shadow Fleet tanker called Paria suffered an anchor malfunction and completely shut down the Bosphorus Strait, one of the world's busiest shipping channels. Turkey had to deploy emergency response teams just to prevent a potential ecological disaster. This fleet represents a massive environmental threat floating across international waters, and until recently, Western nations seemed powerless to stop it. Russia had built what seemed like an unstoppable sanctions-evasion machine, but Ukraine was quietly developing a weapon that would turn the Black Sea into a hunting ground. Ukraine faced a brutal reality at the start of the war. Their navy was virtually non-existent compared to Russia's Black Sea fleet. Traditional naval warfare wasn't an option, so Ukrainian engineers did what they do best. They improvised. In July 2022, SBU Brigadier General Ivan Lukashevich led a team that included the Ukrainian Navy and private defense contractors to create something entirely new. They called it Sea Baby, and it would fundamentally change how naval warfare works. The original Sea Baby measured 6 meters long and could reach speeds between 49 and 60 knots. It had an operational range of 1,000 kilometers and carried enough explosives to cripple large vessels. But the real breakthrough came in October 2024, when Ukraine unveiled a dramatically upgraded version. The new Sea Baby can operate anywhere in the Black Sea, with a range extended to 1,500 kilometers. Its payload capacity doubled to 2,000 kilograms of explosives, giving it enough punch to take down much larger targets. Ukrainian engineers also integrated artificial intelligence into the targeting systems, allowing the drone to distinguish between friendly and enemy vessels while remaining resistant to electronic jamming. What makes Sea Baby particularly devastating is its versatility. These drones aren't just kamikaze boats anymore. Some versions carry Grad rocket launchers, others mount heavy machine guns, and certain models even carry air-to-air missiles to defend against Russian helicopters. The economic efficiency is almost unbelievable. Each Sea Baby costs approximately $250,000 to produce. When you use a $250,000 drone to destroy a vessel worth $65 million or more, you're looking at a 300-to-1 return on investment. No weapon system in modern warfare delivers that kind of cost-effectiveness. Ukraine learned hard lessons about technological vulnerability early in the conflict. When Elon Musk cut Starlink connectivity near Crimea, Ukrainian drones lost their communication links at critical moments. Engineers responded by building redundant communication systems that don't rely on any single provider. These drones can now operate autonomously if needed, following pre-programmed routes and engaging targets without constant human oversight. For a country with virtually no traditional navy, Ukraine has managed to create a maritime threat that Russia's billion-dollar warships struggle to counter. On November 28, 2025, 2 oil tankers were sailing through international waters about 28 nautical miles off Turkey's coast. The Kairos was returning from India after delivering a cargo of Urals crude oil, heading back to Novorossiysk to load another shipment. The Virat had spent most of 2025 sitting idle in the western Black Sea after being slapped with U.S. sanctions in January. Both vessels flew Gambian flags, both were part of Russia's shadow fleet, and both were about to have a very bad day. Ukrainian Sea Baby drones approached their targets with deadly precision. The Kairos took the first hit, and the explosion was catastrophic. Fire erupted across the stern of the vessel as the drone's warhead tore through the hull near the engine room. All 25 crew members had to be evacuated as Turkish Coast Guard vessels rushed to the scene. The Virat was struck shortly after, taking damage but remaining afloat. These weren't random targets. The Virat had been sanctioned by the United States, European Union, United Kingdom, Switzerland, and Canada. The Kairos faced similar sanctions from the EU, UK, and Switzerland. Both tankers appear in the Open Sanctions database, which tracks entities involved in sanctions circumvention schemes. Ukrainian intelligence sources told reporters that the combined capacity of both vessels could have transported nearly $70 million worth of oil. But here's what makes this attack particularly sophisticated. Ukraine deliberately aimed for the propulsion systems and rudders rather than trying to sink the ships outright. This tactical decision served multiple purposes. First, it disabled the vessels without creating an environmental catastrophe that would anger international partners. Second, it sent a clear message to other shadow fleet operators that their ships could be hunted anywhere in the Black Sea. Third, it avoided the diplomatic nightmare of sinking vessels and potentially killing crews in international waters. The timing of these strikes wasn't coincidental. On the same day, Ukrainian drones also attacked the Caspian Pipeline Consortium's marine terminal at Novorossiysk, forcing the facility to completely suspend loading operations. This coordination showed that Ukraine wasn't just going after individual ships anymore. They were executing a comprehensive strategy to disrupt Russia's entire oil export infrastructure, hitting both the vessels that transport the oil and the terminals where it gets loaded. These successful strikes forced Moscow to confront a problem it had been avoiding for months, and the options were all bad. Russia's Black Sea Fleet now faces a strategic nightmare with no good solutions. Ukrainian drones just demonstrated they can strike targets 1,000 kilometers from Ukrainian shores, which means nowhere in the Black Sea offers safety anymore. Russia's fleet has already taken devastating losses throughout this war. The Moskva cruiser sits at the bottom of the ocean. The submarine Rostov-on-Don was destroyed. Multiple corvettes, patrol boats, and missile craft have been sunk or damaged beyond repair. These losses forced Russia to relocate its entire fleet from Sevastopol to Novorossiysk, and even there, ships mostly stay in port. Moscow now has to decide whether to deploy warships to escort shadow fleet tankers. On paper, the Black Sea Fleet still has substantial firepower. 2 Grigorovich-class frigates, 2 Krivak-class frigates, 2 Boyan-M-class corvettes, several Tarantul-class missile boats, and multiple patrol vessels. These ships theoretically could provide escorts for tankers moving to and from Russian ports. But the practical reality is far more complicated. Russian warships have been confined to port for so long that they've had minimal training time at sea. Coordinating multiple vessels during a drone swarm attack requires extensive practice and streamlined command structures. The Black Sea Fleet hasn't demonstrated either capability recently. If Russian warships do venture out to protect tankers, they immediately become targets themselves. Land-based air defense systems can't protect vessels operating in open water, which means these warships would be vulnerable to the same drone attacks that have devastated the fleet over the past 2 years. Ukraine has access to NATO intelligence, including regular observation flights over the Black Sea that track Russian naval movements in real time. Any Russian ship leaving port gets spotted almost immediately. Ukrainian operatives in Istanbul can visually identify Shadow Fleet tankers passing through the Turkish straits and report their movements. The routes these tankers take are predictable because there are only a handful of oil terminals in the region. Sea Baby drones could shadow these vessels through Turkish territorial waters and feed Ukraine continuous updates on their location and heading. Russia has tried turning off AIS transponders on Shadow Fleet vessels to make tracking harder, but this provides only minimal protection. The ships still have to pass through choke points, and their destinations are obvious. Meanwhile, Turkey is caught in an uncomfortable position. Both Ukrainian drone strikes occurred within Turkey's exclusive economic zone, forcing Turkish rescue services to respond. Ankara issued statements about risks to navigation, life, property, and environmental safety, but stopped short of any concrete action. Kazakhstan has been more vocal, particularly about strikes on the Caspian Pipeline Consortium terminal that handles 80% of Kazakh crude exports. Russia's options keep getting worse, and Ukraine knows it. The economic pressure on Russia is mounting significantly. Oil and gas revenue dropped 35% in November to roughly $6.59 billion, part of a broader 22% decline for the entire year. These numbers matter because oil sales remain Russia's single most important income stream, funding both the government and the war effort. The Kremlin is now preparing unpopular tax increases, including a VAT hike that will hit ordinary Russians directly. State media has received guidelines to blame these economic problems on the West rather than the war. In Yakutia, regional officials announced they had to suspend payments to combat veterans serving in Ukraine because of budget shortfalls. When a government can't pay its own soldiers, the economic strain is becoming impossible to hide. These strikes on Russia's Shadow Fleet represent more than just tactical victories. They demonstrate how innovation and precision can challenge conventional military power, and how a determined country can find creative ways to hit back against a much larger adversary. So, what's your take on Ukraine's drone warfare strategy? Do you think these attacks will force Russia to change its approach, or will Moscow find new ways to protect its oil revenues? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you found this breakdown valuable, hit that like button and subscribe for more in-depth analysis of the conflicts shaping our world. Until next time, stay informed.